Now, Nancy, you were at Quambatook at the Times long before I was, wasn't you?
Not that long. I left school, went
This
home.
was in Bendigo, wasn't it?
No, Business College in Hawthorn, Stotts. And I went home on the 30th of November. And
Which year?
1956.
1956, yeah.
When the Olympics were on. And my mother walked down the street and she was talking to Mrs. Page, who they owned the paper at the time, and she said she was getting too old to do the books. They'd have to put somebody on. And Mum said, Nancy's coming home from Business College tonight. So I started Monday.
There wouldn't have been that many jobs for you in Quambatook, would there?
No.
No, I mean there were so few businesses that require someone with your skill. So you were there for what, a year or so, were you, or before we turned up?
No, it was only about following September.
I see. Can you remember how much they paid you when you started?
I think it was £7.9 6.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, when the Page brothers sold the paper to my mother, did you know about this at the time? Did you know they were going to sell? Or?
No, didn't know a thing.
And what happened? Because I wasn't there in Charlton with my family when it was sold and bought by my mother. Do you remember?
They just came and said that they'd sold and they were taking, your mother was taking over about a fortnight later. That was it. And you're going with the business.
So
I was one of the assets.
You were sold, were you, with the business?
Yes, I was either one of the assets or the liabilities. Sometimes I think it was the liabilities, but...
Well, I think it would have made a big difference having you there, because my mother, let's not beat about the bush, did not think this purchase through. I mean, we never really talked about it, but she never gave me any idea that she'd sat down and thought, is this a viable business? And if it's a viable business and I buy it, how are we going to run it? Because she didn't take on anyone. Suddenly the two Page brothers were gone, and she had to have someone else to run a business that she knew very little about. So when it first started off, who ran the paper?
Mr. Abbott.
Norman Abbott, yes.
And Jeff.
My brother, yes. And so that went on for 3 or 4 weeks before I got a phone call in Shepparton, where I was working on the Shepparton News, finishing off my apprenticeship, and I was told that on the Friday that I was finishing up at the Shepparton News, much to the annoyance of the McPherson family, not because I was especially talented, but to suddenly find they'd lost a member of staff at such short notice made them rather cross. And the following Monday, I was driven by Norman Abbott into Quambatook, and for some reason I'd never been to Quambatook before. Now this is astonishing, don't you think? I mean, they're only 30 miles apart, and I'd never ever been to Quambatook. And I have to say that when I was driven down the main street at 6 o'clock on a Monday morning, it was the first time I'd ever seen tumbleweed. Do you remember tumbleweed rolling down the front?
We still get tumbleweed.
Well, I'd never seen tumbleweed except in American cowboy films. And I couldn't believe that when we went into the Times office that it was so unbelievably locked into the past. But I don't suppose you would have noticed that, but I just remember the equipment being completely unmaintained. The linotype barely worked, Fortunately, part of my apprenticeship training was to learn how to strip down a linotype and clean it and reassemble it. The printing press wouldn't stay on its foundations, and halfway through a print run you'd find it would slide off the timber foundations or base that it was on. There was the dark room, which still had one of those old flash powder things in it. I mean, did they ever use the dark room? Not in your time.
No.
Right. Well, coming from Melbourne, and before that Bendigo, and a young lady of the world, what was it like working for the Page brothers?
John used to give me lollies.
Right, I see. I don't know.
But they were okay. Yeah. They'd tell me it was time to go home.
And they were a couple of very old-fashioned.
Yes, they weren't that old really, but they were living in the. Well, the paper was started in 1910 by their father. Or maybe it was, no, I think it might have even been their grandfather.
I think it was, yes.
And nothing had changed.
No, one thing I remember is they still had the old gas lamps there that had never been removed. They had electricity, of course, by the time we took the paper over, but they still had the old gas lamps. And I remember seeing a twig hanging on one of the gas lamps, and I took it off to throw it away, and John expressed some hurt that I'd taken away one of their little prizes from a holiday many decades ago, and I was told it was a bit of wattle that they'd brought back. So that astonished me. But so what happened when Norman Abbott and my younger brother Geoffrey turned up? Did they print the paper there, or were they printing it in Charlton?
They printed it there.
How did they get the equipment to work then? Because it was so, well, I suppose that it was, you could, wasn't, what was the circulation, 400 or something. Quite tiny.
And
how many days a week were they there for? Just the Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday?
Yes.
If I remember rightly, it was published on a Wednesday night, wasn't it?
Yes.
Officially published on the Thursday, printed on the Wednesday night.
Well, officially it was supposed to be Wednesday, but it was Wednesday night.
Ah, right, I see. And did you get any sense of the crisis that there was at the time, because they had the other papers in Charlton to print and everything, but
no. So
you weren't aware of that.
No.
So did you know I was going to turn up into your life?
No. No. We were both pretty. We were young.
Yeah. So on this Monday that I turned up at 6 a.m. with the tumbleweed with Norman Abbott. Then you learnt that I was taking over, or what? Or wasn't it even said that I was taking over?
No, nothing was said.
Yes. Well, I think that I turned out the first Quambatook Times a month after it was bought.
It was round about September when they...
It was bought in September 1957, and I printed the first, my first edition in October. So Norman Abbott and my brother Jeff must have done the first 3 issues, and I think it was at that point they realised that this was ridiculous. They could not print 2 newspapers, because there was the Marangatang Courier as well.
And that had a circulation of about 2.
Yes, well, it was 200, don't run it down. It was a terrible paper, really. And and on that subject, I can't remember how long we ran it for, but it must have been only for a few months before I decided this was a ridiculous thing to be doing, because there was hardly any news in it. There was hardly ever any news in Manangatang at any rate.
They called it originally Manangatang and Robinvale Courier.
Ah,
And then before my time, they used to have one that was the Ultima and Chillingolla Star.
right.
Yes, so they were, I don't know what they were like.
Well, I realised that the Manangatang Courier was a no-no, that I couldn't print it. I didn't have the time, and I only got to meet, there was some lady in Lelbert used to provide a bit of news. And I remember deciding to close the paper down without telling Mum. And she was a little bit horrified. But she did leave me in charge, which is always a mistake to make. And I think that Jeffrey used to come up from time to time, but after a while, Jeff didn't come because I think he had to stay in Charlton doing the Witchy paper and the Charlton paper and doing the job printing. We also had a young boy delivered the papers, didn't we?
Oh, he was sort of a cleaner or something. It was John Beard.
Yes, that's
And his daughter is married to Pam's cousin.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, well, he used to come in on Wednesday night and deliver the papers. And Tom Hogan was the grocery man, used to had Hogan stores, didn't it? He used to write most of the stuff, and he was from a family with journalistic connections because his brother, whose name I now can't remember, was the journalist who did the ABC News in Horsham. So I think Tom had picked up a few clues there. And I used to write a bit of controversial stuff from time to time.
And you had a column, something about Ike. It was...
Oh, I'd forgotten about that column, yes, a bit mischievous. But the amazing thing was, I barely turned 20 when my mother yanked me back from Shepparton, put me in this paper, and without it actually being said that I was in charge, I became the printer and the editor, and she never ever asked me beforehand, or we never consulted about what was going in the paper. She just, I don't know, did she hope for the best, or I don't know, because, you know, at that age, and I know I did write some controversial stuff, it was a big risk, wasn't it?
Yes.
I mean,
and it mustn't have been profitable.
It can't have been a profitable paper. I wouldn't have thought so. But
and it was fourpence.
Fourpence? Oh, right. It was fourpence. A bargain. Yeah, well, so when Mum sold all the papers, I stayed on in Charlton to help Ian Cameron, who purchased the papers, to keep it going. So what happened then? What happened when the paper was sold to Ian Cameron? Where did that leave you?
I was married. I got married in 1960.
Right.
And that was it. I finished...
So you left?
Yes.
Right. I see. So they didn't have to fire you or anything?
No, I wasn't fired.
Unpleasant like that?
No, and I didn't get a package.
You didn't get a package? What? You must have got a pension. Right. Well, so your marriage and your departure from the Quambatook Times came about the time that Ian Cameron took over, or was he your boss for a little while?
No. Your mother was still my boss, and you were still printing the Quambatook Times, in 1961, because your mother came up and I was staying with my mother after my first child was born, and she came round to see me.
Ah.
So that was January 61. So she still had it then.
Right. So it was about, yes, so it was 62, I went to Bendigo to work for 3BO, so I was there for, yes, I was in Bendigo for 2 years, and I was at 3OW in Melbourne for 5 years, and we came over here at the end of 68 for a few months and stayed on.
Still here.
Yes, okay.
Got a pommy grandson.
Well, I mean, is there any particular things that you remember from your time at the Quambatook Times?
Oh, only going down to the bank, and then that was the big thing for the.
Your highlight of your day, was
The
it?
highlight of the day. Didn't have to have an armed escort, and going across to the milk bar and buying you a bottle of Coke.
Right, all right. Well, on the day, I mean, 2 days a week, you were just there by yourself, weren't
Yes,
you? I
yes.
mean, you can't have had an awful lot to do in that time. Was it boring or what?
Oh, I can't really.
You can't remember.
Well, I don't
Was
know.
it job?
People used to call in to see me, and we used to do a bit of talking.
Who did?
Different girls used to come in and
right.
have a, you know.
Oh, yes, so,
Yes.
oh well, that's
Yes.
all right. Well,
I did my work, did what had to be done, and that was it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Well, it's great to talk to you a few years on. And
We're not 19 and 20 anymore.
No, we're not. And at any rate, that's really good to talk to you. And who would have thought we'd be talking here in Ealing in London? Yeah.
Nobody. I
Yeah.
definitely didn't in 19.
No, well, who would have thought when I sat in the Quambatook Times listening to Top of the Pops and various things, or what they call it, the top 20, or
And-
as we printing stuff and sometimes crowbarring the printing press back onto its foundations.
And Jeff with his, what was it, Little Richard.
Oh, right,
Yes.
yeah. So there you are. It was.
And I remember one night I was going to the Glenlough East Ball, and you printed the sash.
Oh, really?
Yes, and I had to, you know, have the gold. I had to be very careful with it, and I brought it home.
Oh, right, I'd forgotten all about
And I've still got
printing.
it.
Oh, right, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But that back room, oh, it was great, wasn't it?
Uh-uh.
Air conditioned.
Oh, air conditioned, yeah, with the windows open, yeah.
Not with the windows open in the winter time with the. It wasn't lined. It was freezing.
No.
And you had to walk through the weeds to get to the toilet.
Oh, I didn't know we had a toilet. I thought we just used a tree out the back, but there you go.
No, we had a toilet.
Oh, well, you're a lady,
Yeah.
you see. Yeah, okay. All right, well, thank you. It's
Thank
good
you.
and nice to have a record of this.